song that taught me more about songwriting than anything I ever heard in my life was Merle Haggard's Holding Things Together. It has one verse, and the verse is this. It says, "Today was Angie's birthday, and it must have slipped your mind. I tried twice to call you, with no answer either time."
Today, country music feels slick, polished, and often predictable, but it wasn't always that way. Once upon a time, a Kentucky-born outsider stormed into the scene with a guitar slung low, a crooked grin, and zero interest in playing by Nashville's rules. That man was Dwight Yoakam. He wasn't just a country singer, he was a force of nature who challenged the industry, reinvented honky-tonk, and sparked a full-blown musical revival with nothing but raw talent, a sharp tongue, and a Stetson hat that became his signature dot. But for every meteoric rise, there's often a shadow lurking behind the spotlight. After dominating the charts in the late 80s and early 90s, Yoakam vanished from the country music radar. No big send-off, no official retirement, just gone. Fans were left wondering, what happened? Why did one of the most unique voices in country music suddenly disappear? As it turns out, Dwight's story is as dramatic and unconventional as his music. From defying Nashville's expectations and feuding with record executives to crashing into Hollywood, losing fortunes, and hiding from the public eye, his journey is both a triumph and a tragedy. And just when the world thought he was out for good, he returned. Older, wiser, and with a surprising new chapter to write. So what led to Dwight Yoakam's fall from grace? Why did he walk away at the height of his career? And more importantly, what is he doing now? This is the story of the rebel cowboy who tried to save country music and nearly lost everything in the process. Dwight's rise to fame. Dwight Yoakam didn't climb the country music ladder, he kicked it over and built his own. While most aspiring country stars packed their dreams and headed to Nashville, Dwight took a hard left and pointed his boots toward Los Angeles. It was the early 1980s, and country music was leaning heavily into glossy pop ballads and crossover hits. Dwight wanted no part of it. Instead, he was determined to revive the raw, gritty sound of honky-tonk and the Bakersfield style once championed by legends like Buck Owens and Merle Haggard. Armed with a love for old-school twang and a voice that dripped with lonesome heartbreak, Dwight began performing in LA's underground music scene. This wasn't the expected stomping ground for a country artist, but in the dive bars of Hollywood, Dwight's stripped-down, hard-edged sound struck a nerve. He wasn't polished. He wasn't pop. He was pure outlaw country, and people were starting to pay attention. Then came the music. His 1986 debut album, Guitars, Cadillacs, etc., didn't just turn heads, it flipped the table. With driving rhythms, honky-tonk riffs, and unapologetic lyrics, it proved that traditional country could still move units and shake souls. The album cracked the Billboard charts and earned Dwight his first taste of real success. But it was Buenas Noches from a lonely room in 1988 that cemented his legend. The record featured the haunting hit Streets of Bakersfield, a duet with Buck Owens himself. The collaboration wasn't just a song, it was a symbolic passing of the torch. Buck had been out of the limelight for years, but Dwight's boldness brought him back into the spotlight. The song shot to #1, and suddenly Dwight Yoakam was no longer a fringe act, he was a bona fide country music star. He wasn't just gaining fans, he was commanding the respect of legends. He proved that country music didn't need to sell out to sell records, that an old school approach, if delivered with authenticity and fire, could still break through the noise. For a moment, it seemed like Dwight had cracked the code and country music was on the verge of a gritty, rootsy revival. But not everyone was celebrating. Nashville's worst nightmare, Dwight versus the Machine. While fans and critics were celebrating Dwight's rise, the Nashville establishment was watching with furrowed brows. Dwight wasn't playing the game, and worse, he wasn't pretending to either. Instead of moving to Tennessee, he stayed planted in Los Angeles. Instead of buttering up executives, he publicly mocked them. Instead of following the country pop trends, he doubled down on hillbilly grit. To many industry insiders, Dwight was a troublemaker, a thorn in the side of a carefully curated country image. When he was advised to stop using the word hillbilly in interviews because it might offend the mainstream audience, Dwight refused. To him, hillbilly wasn't an insult, it was heritage. He also didn't hesitate to call out hypocrisy in the music business. When Columbia Records dropped Johnny Cash, Dwight was one of the few artists to speak up. He called it out as a betrayal of country's roots. When MTV declined to play country music videos, Dwight blasted the network for ignoring an entire genre. That kind of blunt honesty made him a hero to fans, but a menace to gatekeepers. Still, for a while, it worked. He was selling records, he had radio hits, he packed venues from coast to coast, and Nashville, for all its reluctance, couldn't ignore him, not yet. But by the mid-1990s, the winds began to shift. Country music was swinging back towards safer, shinier territory. Labels were investing in young, clean-cut acts who stuck to the script. Dwight's albums, while still strong artistically, began to sell less. Radio gave him less airplay. Nashville, slowly but surely, started to shut him out. By 1995, Dwight Yoakam found himself on the outside again. Not because he had failed, but because he had refused to conform. His rebellious spirit, once celebrated, had become a liability in an industry that valued predictability over principle. So what did Dwight do? He disappeared, not in scandal, not in defeat. He just quietly stepped out of the spotlight. No tour, no farewell, no fanfare. The cowboy who had ridden in to save country music had vanished into the desert. And for nearly a decade, fans would be left wondering, where did Dwight Yoakam go? Early life and musical foundations. Long before Dwight Yoakam became the outsider hero of country music, he was just a boy growing up in the working-class neighborhoods of Columbus, Ohio, with roots stretching back to the Appalachian Hills of Kentucky. Born on October 23, 1956 in Pikeville, Kentucky, Dwight David Yoakam was the eldest of 3 children. His father, David, served in the United States Army and later worked in factories and ran a gas station, while his mother, Ruth Ann, encouraged creativity and music in their home. Music was a constant presence in the Yoakam household. Whether it was Johnny Cash growling from the radio or his parents singing old country tunes during road trips to visit relatives, Dwight absorbed it all. His first guitar, a hand-me-down his father couldn't quite figure out, opened a door. Though he accidentally broke that one, a new guitar gifted to him at Christmas when he was just 8 reignited the spark. By the time he was in the 4th grade, Dwight had already started writing and recording his own music. His influences were a wild, wonderful mix. Traditional country legends like Johnny Horton, rock and roll icons like Elvis Presley, and bluegrass with all its irony and intensity. This blend of inspirations gave Dwight a unique perspective early on. Music wasn't just entertainment, it was expression, identity, and rebellion. In high school, Dwight dabbled in acting and drama, eventually performing in a school production of Flowers for Algernon. That experience gave him a taste of the spotlight and helped him build the confidence he'd later need on stage. He also played drums in the school band and formed a rock and roll group with friends, performing at local parties and school functions. Known as the Greaser Band, they were a hit in the Columbus party circuit. After high school, Dwight briefly attended Ohio State University, but his heart wasn't in academia. Music had already claimed him. He dropped out to chase his dream full-time, performing in local clubs across Ohio. That dream hit a snag early when a con artist pretended to offer him a music deal, an early warning sign of the sharks swimming in the music industry. Still determined, Dwight made the move that would change everything. Not to Nashville, the expected path for country hopefuls, but to Los Angeles, where the lines between punk, rock, and country were beginning to blur in underground venues. It was a bold move, and it would pay off in ways that even he couldn't have imagined. Lights, camera, collapse. By the late 1990s, Dwight Yoakam had grown tired of the country music industry. With radio stations growing colder and Nashville tightening its grip on the genre, he turned to a new stage: Hollywood. After all, if country music wasn't going to give him the freedom he craved, maybe film would. At first, the gamble worked. Dwight started with small roles in television dramas and gradually transitioned into movies. His breakout acting moment came in 1996 with Sling Blade, a critically acclaimed film directed by Billy Bob Thornton. Dwight played Doyle Hargraves, a violent and unpredictable antagonist. It was a performance so raw, so unsettling that audiences were stunned to realize the man behind the hat and heartbreak ballads could deliver such menace on screen. Critics took notice. Dwight wasn't just dabbling, he was good. He went on to appear in films like The Newton Boys, The Minus Man, alongside Sheryl Crow, and Red Rock West. His typecasting as a villain became a strange but fitting contrast to his gentle country persona. In 1997, the cast of Sling Blade won a Screen Actors Guild Award for Outstanding Performance by a Cast, and Dwight was officially seen as a serious actor. But ambition, as it often does, led him to a dangerous crossroads. Craving full creative control, Dwight decided to write, direct, and star in his own Western, South of Heaven, West of Hell. It was a deeply personal project. He even composed the soundtrack himself. The film was meant to be his artistic masterpiece, music, performance, direction, and vision all rolled into one. Then it all fell apart. Right before production began, the film's major investor pulled out. Dwight had two choices: shelve the project or finance it himself. He chose the latter, selling his Malibu home to fund the film. But the challenges piled up. Production costs ballooned, the cast began walking out, and lawsuits were filed after the movie bombed both commercially and critically. Worse, the financial fallout was devastating. Dwight's production company went bankrupt. His longtime touring band was dismantled. Even his friendship with guitarist and producer Pete Anderson, the man who had helped shape his signature sound, fell apart amid unpaid debts and broken promises. What should have been Dwight's cinematic triumph turned into a crushing collapse. Though he would continue to land acting roles in films like Panic Room, Wedding Crashers, and The Three Burials of Melquiades Estrada, the Hollywood dream had taken its toll. Dwight had risked everything for artistic freedom. What he got in return was years of legal trouble, financial ruin, and a quiet exile from both the country and the film world's dot. But as history has shown, especially in Dwight's case, exile doesn't mean the story is over.
Heartbreak in a cowboy hat, love, loss, and loneliness. While Dwight Yoakam was juggling career crises and industry battles, his personal life was unraveling in quieter but equally painful ways. Behind the flashy outfits and sharp songwriting was a man searching for stability, something he rarely found. Dwight's romantic life often played out like the sad songs he sang, brief bursts of passion followed by disappointment and the occasional public jab. One of the most surprising chapters came in 1992 when he appeared at the Academy Awards arm in arm with none other than Sharon Stone. At the time, she was a bona fide movie star riding high off Basic Instinct, while Dwight, though critically respected, was still an outsider to Hollywood. The pairing shocked everyone, but the relationship was short-lived and ended with a jab that stuck. After their split, Stone reportedly told friends that kissing Dwight was like a dirt sandwich. Whether a joke or a bitter remark, the quote spread quickly, turning a private heartbreak into a punchline. For Dwight, the message was clear. In Hollywood, charm and talent didn't guarantee respect or protection from humiliation. He moved on, briefly dating Karen Duffy, an actress known for Dumb and Dumber. That relationship lasted longer, about 2 years, but again, it didn't lead to lasting love. Perhaps Dwight's dual identities, the California cowboy and country music rebel, left him stuck between two worlds, never quite belonging to either. In Nashville, he was too edgy. In Hollywood, too grounded in his Kentucky roots. Even his brief connection with fellow country star Wynonna Judd was more of a fleeting headline than a real romance. Legend has it that she once declared, "Find me that man in the cowboy hat and he's mine." But tour schedules, career demands, and Dwight's growing wariness of public relationships made it hard for anything real to grow. By the early 2000s, Dwight had weathered his fair share of romantic failures. But while the public assumed he was just another loner artist drifting through fame, Dwight was slowly building something much quieter and much more lasting, far from the cameras. Where did Dwight go?
By the time the early 2000s rolled around, Dwight Yoakam had effectively vanished from the center stage. He wasn't touring like he used to, he wasn't releasing chart-topping albums, and his days of Hollywood premieres and country music award shows seemed like a distant memory. So where did he go? The answer is both surprising and deeply human. Dwight stepped back to heal, rebuild, and reimagine. First, he turned his attention to acting, not as a starry-eyed dreamer, but as a character actor. Roles in Panic Room, Banditas, and Wedding Crashers kept him visible, even if they weren't headline-grabbing. He played villains, loners, and unpredictable men, roles that mirrored in many ways his public image.
It wasn't a comeback, but it was a steady presence. Behind the scenes, Dwight was dealing with the wreckage of South of Heaven, West of Hell. Financial losses from the film had forced him to make difficult decisions, including parting ways with his longtime producer and bandmate Pete Anderson. The breakup was painful and public. Anderson would later sue Dwight over canceled shows and unpaid dues. Though the case was settled quietly, the damage was done. Creatively, Dwight struggled to find a new foothold. Country music had shifted again. Younger stars with radio-friendly hits dominated the airwaves, and Nashville seemed more sanitized than ever. For a while, Dwight seemed content to stay in the margins, experimenting, releasing albums with little promotion, and letting his core fan base carry the torch. Then, in 2012, something changed. With the release of 3 Pairs, Dwight Yoakam roared back to life. The album was personal, confident, and widely praised. It didn't just mark a return, it marked a reinvention. This wasn't Dwight chasing trends. This was Dwight being Dwight, and the world finally was ready to appreciate him again. Critics hailed 3 Pairs as one of his best works in decades. New fans discovered him. Old fans rejoiced. And Dwight, now older and more grounded, seemed to be at peace with his place in the music world. No longer chasing radio hits or commercial fame, he embraced the niche he had carved out, a space for authenticity, storytelling, and soul. And as the music returned, so did something else: love. Quietly, Dwight had been dating photographer Emily Joyce since 2010. While paparazzi chased younger stars, Dwight and Emily lived largely under the radar. In 2020, during the pandemic lockdown, they tied the knot in a private ceremony with fewer than 10 people in attendance. Months later, they welcomed their first child, a son named Dalton. At 63, Dwight Yoakam had found something far more meaningful than chart positions or gold records. He had found family, and perhaps for the first time, he wasn't just writing songs about love and loss, he was living the other side of the story. Courtrooms and comebacks? Though Dwight Yoakam had finally found personal peace and creative freedom, the shadows of past decisions continued to follow him. In the 2000s and 2010s, legal battles and industry fallout made it clear walking away from the mainstream had come with a steep price. One of the most bitter breaks in Dwight's career came when his longtime guitarist and producer Pete Anderson filed a lawsuit in 2004. Anderson accused Dwight of breaching an oral agreement by failing to perform multiple shows in 2002, causing him to lose over $44,000 in income. Their partnership, once central to Dwight's sound and success, ended in silence and court documents. Though the case was settled privately, Anderson later remarked that he admired Dwight's artistry but had no intention of working with him again. That lawsuit was only the beginning. In 2021, Yoakam found himself in a new legal conflict, this time with Warner Music Group. The label had pulled several of his songs from streaming services after his contract expired, effectively cutting him off from his digital fan base. In an era where online streaming is essential for artists, this was more than a technical issue. It was a direct blow to his legacy. Dwight responded with a lawsuit of his own, demanding the return of rights to his music. He argued that the label was violating U.S. copyright law by refusing to allow him to reclaim control of songs that should have reverted to him. The battle played out behind the scenes, but in early 2022, a resolution was reached. Shortly afterward, his songs returned to Spotify, Apple Music, and other platforms, restoring access to decades of iconic work. Meanwhile, Dwight was carving a new lane for himself in the business world. Always a lover of nostalgia and Americana, he launched his own food brand, Bakersfield Biscuits. What started as a quirky side project quickly grew into a nationwide frozen food line, offering Southern comfort food with a personal stamp of authenticity. It was proof that Dwight hadn't lost his entrepreneurial spirit. If the music industry didn't want him on its terms, he'd find new ones, and do it with a smile. The quiet renaissance Dwight today. If you're looking for Dwight Yoakam today, don't expect to find him making headlines or chasing trends. These days, he's far from the chaotic whirl of industry politics or celebrity gossip. Instead, he's settled into a life that's grounded, private, and surprisingly wholesome. Since the release of 3 Pairs in 2012, Dwight has continued to release high-quality albums, including Secondhand Heart and Swimming Pools, Movie Stars, which featured bluegrass interpretations of his earlier work. Critics praised the maturity and craftsmanship of these records. They weren't chasing radio play. They were deep cuts for loyal fans, delivered with honesty and heart. Live performances, while less frequent than in his prime, still reveal a dedicated artist with nothing to prove and everything to give. His concerts aren't flashy affairs. They're intimate, musically rich shows where fans old and new can connect with an artist who never sold out, even when it would have been easier. Outside the stage lights, Dwight has embraced his role as a husband and father. His marriage to Emily Joyce and the birth of their son Dalton in 2020 shifted his focus. Friends and colleagues note that fatherhood has brought a new layer of calm and perspective to the man once known for his restless ambition. He hasn't walked away from entertainment completely either. Dwight continues to act on occasion and recently reunited with Billy Bob Thornton for the Amazon Prime series Goliath, and yet he's chosen to keep most of his life and his art on his own terms. There's something poetic about this chapter in Dwight Yoakam's story. Once branded too country for the city and too rock for the country, he now lives in a space entirely his own. No longer needing approval from award shows or radio stations, he continues to do what he's always done: tell stories, write songs, and live life on the edge of the mainstream. He may not be a Hall of Famer yet, but to his fans, Dwight Yoakam is already a legend. Dwight Yoakam's journey has been anything but predictable. From honky-tonk hero to Hollywood wildcard, from chart-topping success to quiet family life, he's lived every verse of the songs he writes. He challenged the industry, took risks most wouldn't dare, and somehow came out the other side still standing, Stetson hat intact.
He may never be Nashville's favorite son, but to millions of fans, Dwight represents something more valuable: authenticity. In an era of manufactured stars and fleeting fame, he's remained unapologetically himself. Now it's your turn. What's your favorite Dwight Yoakam album or song? Have you ever seen him live? Do you think he deserves a spot in the Country Music Hall of Fame? Drop your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to hear your take on this legendary rebel. And if you enjoyed this deep dive into Dwight's life and legacy, hit that like button, subscribe for more music stories, and ring the bell so you never miss an episode. Until next time, keep your boots dirty and your music real.